besides being known by many other names, the Gospel of Luke is also known as the Gospel of Prayer. And the reason why it is known by this name is because Jesus is shown praying more often in Luke than in any other gospel. In the gospel text of today, the disciples realize that Jesus has gone away to a lonely place to pray. And after Jesus completes his hour of prayer and comes back to them, they ask him, saying, "Lord, teach us how to pray." None of us knows how to pray, no matter how prayerful we think we might be. It is the Lord who teaches us how to pray like he taught his disciples. And so Jesus teaches this prayer, which we know by the name Our Father, which is also found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 7 to 13, and is a longer prayer there. Luke's prayer is short and contains 4 petitions, which we must constantly keep in our minds. The first petition in this prayer, which Jesus taught his disciples, is that everything must begin with God and not with myself. God is the origin and God is the completer, and therefore everything must end also with God. And so the first petition is to pray that God's kingdom of justice, of peace, of love, of freedom, of the fact that we might live in harmony becomes a reality. And so we ask that God's kingdom come and that God remain God, and that we recognize that God is God and not make things God. So we want God's name to be holy. We want God's name to be revered. We want God's name to be recognized as God. And we want his kingdom to come. The second petition is what might seem to us to be mundane or regular. It is the petition for our daily needs, metaphorized in the word bread. Jesus uses the word bread because bread was the staple food for people at his time. Bread is just a metaphor for our daily needs. So we turn to the Lord for bread, and Jesus knew very well that it was the baker and not God who provided the bread. And yet Jesus knew that the baker was the secondary cause, God was the primary cause. And because for Jesus, everything began and ended with God, he turns to the Father and asks for bread, which is for the daily needs. The third petition is a tremendously challenging petition, which many of us find difficult to do, and that is to forgive. Why do we find it difficult to forgive? Because we wrongly imagine that people have hurt us. If I do not allow a person to hurt me, the question of forgiveness doesn't arise. And so, even if for some reason I've allowed someone to hurt me, I forgive that person whom I think wrongly has hurt me. I let it go. I make sure that I don't hold resentment in my heart. I don't hold anger in my heart. Today, any doctor worth his or her salt will tell you that the larger majority of our ailments stem from the fact that we hold these negatives in our hearts. The negative of revenge, the negative of resentment, the negative of anger, the negative of bitterness, the negative of hating someone. Those negatives take such a hold of us that they affect the body. And that is why so many of our ailments are what we call psychosomatic. The psyche, that is the inner person, is affected. And because the inner person is affected, the soma, the body, is affected as well. And so therefore, in order to enjoy good health, in order to enjoy the beautiful life that God has given us, one of the things that we must do is forgive. And we are asking God to forgive as we forgive. Which means you are telling God that if you don't forgive, God should not forgive you. If you hold resentment in your heart, God must hold resentment in his heart as well. And if God were to hold this resentment in his heart every time I sinned, where would I be? I would be nowhere. And so, because God forgives, and because God loves, and because God lets go, I am invited in turn to forgive, to love, and to let go. And finally, I ask God not to put me to the test. That God will try me, and that life will try me, and that there will be hurdles and obstacles and challenges that come my way. But I petition God. I ask God to give me the grace to face them with equanimity, to face them with a mind and a heart that is confident that God is by my side. And so, the prayer which Jesus taught his disciples and teaches us is not simply a prayer which we recite, but it is an attitude. An attitude first, that I realize that everything begins with God and goes back to God, that God is the one who provides me everything I need, including forgiveness for my sins. And because God does that, I forgive, I love, I give in return. Will you, after hearing the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, acknowledge your dependence on God? And if there is someone whom you have not yet forgiven, will you forgive today?